I am nearing the end of my Transformers binge, and while some of these have been a little rough, watching all of these for the first time has drastically increased my excitement for the rise of the beasts. I now have a solid understanding of this overarching story, and can appreciate at least some of the aspects of these movies. For this video, I saw The Last Night, the final Transformers film set before the rise of the beasts. I'm not sure if Bumblebee is a prequel or a completely different shoot-off of the character. I should probably figure that out before I watch it, but at this point I'm caught up on the main story of this world. And this was not necessarily a strong conclusion to these character stories. It had some good moments spaced throughout, but overall I was not impressed with the story or the execution. In terms of quality of filmmaking, I think this was my least favorite of the 5. There were multiple times when I was taken out of the story by bad editing, where it would cut away from an interaction between characters at the worst possible time, where I felt like more needed to be seen or just some more space to breathe. And there was nothing about the action and the way it was edited that made it come even close to some of the other movies. There were a lot of shots placed within these sequences that just didn't do anything for the movie, and they weren't visually appealing either, so I'm not quite sure what they were thinking here. The dialogue here also had some of my least favorite moments from the entire franchise. Certain lines or deliveries that felt out of place in the story and to these characters. There have been cases like this in the past movies, but it never took me out of the moment like it did here. And there just wasn't any memorable music or even action really. The one good action moment that the movie has, in my opinion, is when Optimus Prime finally arrives during the final battle in Cybertron. Other than that, there was nothing captivating or cinematic that really makes me have a good time watching this. Going more into the story, the opening scene was in my opinion the worst of the franchise. I got excited when I saw we were in the Dark Ages, but it never got to the point for me where it felt like anything more than a bunch of people in costume fighting. I don't know if it was the cinematography or my harsh expectations coming in. And then the humor with Merlin didn't work for me at all. I don't understand what the intent was with the character, but I think his importance could have been established in a much better manner. We get back to the present day, where we start with a group of kids entering a prohibited zone, where we first meet Isabella. Throughout this opening scene with her, I was interested in her as a character, but especially when Canopy is killed and she has that raw emotional reaction, it was hard for me to care as much as I wanted to, because I just didn't know her well enough yet. I think I could have really grown to like the character and have that connection if Isabella Merced had been given an opportunity much later on in the episode to showcase that acting talent again, but in a more meaningful situation. And then by the time I started to get used to her presence in the story, she was taken out of it completely, for much of the movie. I understood why it happened, but I still would have liked to get a little more of her before she shows back up at the end for the final battle. Maybe even one small scene back with her and the Autobots in the junkyard. One of the things I had been looking forward to with this movie was the characters now that I already had an attachment with some of them from the Age of Extinction, but other than Cade, they completely threw out the other two. I was able to grow to like some of the newer ones here, but I think a lot of these films would benefit from having a more consistent cast of characters from one movie to the next. Because every time, but especially here with all the secret society and ancient history stuff, there just seems like there's so much backstory and history to catch up on to the point where it all feels rushed. Everything with the secret society and the Knights of the Round Table really intrigued me, and as a result I was really interested in Anthony Hopkins' character. But the history of it all was gone over so quickly that I didn't have time to understand or appreciate it. So I was just left feeling flat for the rest of the time. I did, however, really like Cade in this movie, and his story. And even though it took a bit of time for me to come around on her, Vivian too. However, the talisman seemed like it was never fully utilized. I get that it symbolized him being chosen, and he had the one moment where he saves Prime with the sword, but other than that we spent more time watching it slither around his body than seeing why it was actually important. And also, the talisman was introduced, then we get the horns coming out of the planet, and then we immediately jump to the end of the world. It felt really sudden, and I think it would have benefited from taking that a little slower. This movie also brought back a few familiar characters from previous movies. Although it felt a bit forced, Agent Simmons and the role he played felt true to the character, and it was the perfect amount. We get a good amount of him and he had an impact on the story, but it never felt like he overshadowed anything. I was really excited when I realized Colonel Williams was back in the movie, because he was one of my favorite characters from the first 3, but I was disappointed with how he was used here. He never got much to do, and he didn't feel like the same person either. In his other appearances, he was always the reasonable one, and supported the Autobots when it became apparent that it was the best thing for the country. But here, working with Megatron and the Decepticons to get the staff, hunting Cade and Vivian, it all felt like a big reach for what has already been established about him. I was never really a fan of the TRF as a whole, not because they're the bad guys and we're supposed to hate them, but every movie it feels like there's a brand new stuck-up official or a group of soldiers that are opposed to the Autobots. But every time it's a new thing, rinse and repeat for every movie. If they want to keep the human antagonist element, and they have these people never learn their lesson, at least keep the same organization or something rather than just replacing it every time. And then one last thing I want to touch on. I did enjoy Cogman's presence and some of the jokes were funny, but it did get to the point during the investigation where it was overused and lost some of its humor and special feeling. Comment down below what you think of the 5th Transformers movie, and what movie reviews you'd like to see in the future. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for more movie content, and follow me on my various platforms listed in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.